Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Just a minute.
Why do you think the B?
All
Okay.
right, we're ready for you, Warren.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm talking on a topic I really like to talk a lot about. It's contemporizing traditional jewelry. And I've taught jewelry making students about jewelry design for many years. And I almost see this real reluctance to try new things, a reluctance to develop new forms and challenge universally held beliefs about color and point and line and plane. And my students frequently fall back on well-established traditional looks. And for me, I want to see them exploit and challenge and even violate traditional design principles and see what they can come up with. And this is at the heart of what it means to work as a contemporary jewelry designer. So it's obvious why my students and really most jewelry designers and most people who wear and buy jewelry hold on so tightly to traditional inspirations. It gives them a feeling of oneness with the past or oneness with a particular social cultural group. It might mean a feeling of connection to a traditional look, a feel, a value, a way of life. And in many ways, this reliance on traditional designs seems like a safer choice and a less riskier choice than choosing something that is a more contemporary alternative.
Can I just interrupt quickly? I can't see, if you have something displaying on the screen, I'm not seeing it. Am I
Okay.
the only one?
I've shared this. Let me
I
try
can't
sharing
see it
again.
either.
I can't see it either.
Me either.
Okay.
Me either.
Can you see it now?
No.
Uh, hmm. So
It's
I've hit the
stuck
share.
it's stuck on a prompt that has started sharing, so it's almost like it's not.
It keeps spinning.
Let's see,
And
share.
it does say Warren Feld's screen. So, but for me, it's black.
Can you try to stop it and maybe try to start it again?
Let's see. Okay, the Zoom is telling me my screen is being shared. So let's.
No.
Try to stop share and then start it one more time.
Okay, I'm going to bring up that screen again. Can you see it now?
There we
Yeah.
go.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about contemporizing traditional jewelry. And I always try to get people my students, to violate and challenge norms about traditional design because they like to fall back on traditional design. They feel it's safer. And it's safer and less risky because the appeal and meaning more traditional styles have are more likely to be understood. And it's easier to say something's pretty or it's ugly, knowing ahead of time that other people around you will more likely have the same opinion. So jewelry designers already have internalized and know the sociocultural clues and rules for judging things as good or bad. And we can anticipate that our clients know these traditional rules of critique as well. But really, jewelry makers working with traditional designs have entered a sort of Faustian bargain. Yes, it's often easier to design, make and sell pieces with a strong sense of history and tradition. And yes, it's also true that the traditional guiding fashion styles have also become, because their design elements can be so easily standardized, easily to produce by machine, So on the one hand, this makes them more accessible to more people at lower prices, but on the other hand, with more standardization and machine fabrication, you get more same old monotony in design. And to make matters worse, all this ends up replacing the need for jewelry designers in the first place. And you see this happening now in the United States. There's an annual 6% decline in job openings for jewelry makers overall. Yet concurrently, there's a 2% increase in job openings for contemporary jewelry designers, designers with strong, more artistic and design skills. So the jewelry designers' Faustian bargain is basically leading to their own obsolescence. And people today who wear and buy jewelry also find themselves in a sort of Faustian bargain. So traditional norms make it easier to relate to traditionally styled jewelry, thus making it more comfortable and less threatening to wear or buy. But traditional jewelry, shaped by these strong socio-cultural norms, often puts dampers on self-expression. These designs also restrict a sense of femininity. So the person who wears and buys traditional jewelry has also made that Faustian bargain, and that bargain leads to restrictions on people being themselves. So the problem for the jewelry designer today is how to achieve jewelry designs which are more contemporary, something other than a replay or reworking of traditional preferences and styles. The design risk is much higher to make pieces that are more contemporary because we have to construct the rules for evaluating these contemporary pieces piece by piece and not rely on more universal sociocultural norms signifying to us how to determine whether something looks good or bad. So one option is to totally reject traditions, totally reject norms, totally reject design conventions, and that's okay. You see this in many contemporary art jewelry pieces and avant-garde pieces. But today I want to discuss another option, what I call contemporizing traditional jewelry. And the challenge for the designer here when contemporizing traditional jewelry is how to successfully marry personal artistic intent with traditional ideas, keeping the jewelry design essential and alive for today's audiences. So during this hour, while I'm unfolding a set of ideas about jewelry design and traditional styles and contemporary styles, I want you to think about three guiding questions. So first, how is contemporary jewelry different from traditional jewelry? Second, to what degree should the contemporized piece reference the traditional piece which inspired it? And third, if the wearer does not feel a connection between the contemporized jewelry and all those social normative things which signal whether something's good or bad, can the contemporized piece still be considered saleable and successful? So I want to do a little visualization exercise. It's called a thinking routine, and just spend a few seconds just mulling in your mind as I list each of these 5 keywords, what these words mean for you as a jewelry designer or beater. So the first word is traditional. So when you hear the phrase traditional styles, traditional jewelry styles, so in your mind, what do you see, what do you think, and what do you know? You think of traditional styles. Let's take the next one, contemporized. When you hear the word contemporized jewelry styles, what are you visualizing? What do you see? What do you think? And what do you know? Contemporized styles. Let's take another type of idea, conformity. We hear conformity in jewelry. What comes to mind? What do you see? What do you think? And what do you know? Conformity and jewelry. And its opposite, individuality and jewelry. What do you see? What do you think? And what do you know? Individuality and jewelry. And the last important keyword is the idea of connectedness. So when you try to visualize being connected to jewelry or connected to a jewelry style, what do you see? What do you think? And what do you know? So my name again is Warren Feld, and I'm a jewelry designer from Nashville, Tennessee. And most people recognize me as the originator of the International Ugly Necklace Contest, but I'm going to swear to you I can design jewelry that's not ugly. For the past almost 40 years, not only have I been designing jewelry and teaching classes and workshops, but I've also been exploring and writing about what it means to become literate and fluent in jewelry design. And underlying all this is a strong belief in the design concept of jewelry, that jewelry is only art as it's worn. Now, I think this concept of contemporizing traditional styles is very important. We want today's jewelry designer to have the freedom, the motivation, the tools which encourage and allow his or her self-expression, for the artist within to come out and be really fully reflected in their pieces. And we want today's wearers, buyers, collectors, exhibitors of jewelry to want to wear, buy, collect, exhibit pieces which do not get subsumed by history, thus don't get more standardized, don't get less artistic, don't get more monotonous in some ways. We want jewelry designers to survive and thrive and not be replaced by machines, because their efforts tilting so to traditions become so predictable that they become so easily standardized. And so this tendency to replace handcraft with machine craft is nothing new. And a prime example is the Art Deco style jewelry of the 1920s and 30s. This style is so rooted in geometric forms that these became easy to replicate by machine, and famous jewelry designers at the time eagerly sought out industrialist partners. They saw a way to speed up the manufacture of these pieces and make more money. But this is the Faustian bargain. This put these individual jewelry artists who championed the styles in the 20s and 30s out of work. And there was a rapid decline since then in designers who turn out handcrafted jewelry. And this is one of my major concerns. Our technology has progressed to such an extent that most technical tasks a jewelry maker does can now be done by machine. And this has focused a lot of my work on advocating for a more contemporary approach to jewelry design, with a subfield I call contemporizing traditional jewelry. But contemporary jewelry should not be confused with avant-garde. All avant-garde is contemporary, but not all contemporary is avant-garde. In fact, most contemporary jewelry is not avant-garde. Contemporary jewelry is more a way of thinking through design rather than a particular style or fashion. So contemporary does not mean outlandish, does not mean using bizarre materials, does not mean exaggerating some design element. And contemporary style doesn't represent things that are so out there in design that we label them things we would never wear ourselves. Contemporary is a particular way of thinking through choices about design elements, their combinations and arrangements, and the choices which result in a strong sense of personal expression, both for the designer and the wearer alike. So when you think about contemporary jewelry, you should be looking for pieces which are very reflective of the individual designer's hand. Contemporary pieces are particularly expressive because they challenge, they exploit, they violate traditional art theory, such as the use of color, the use of point, line, plane. Contemporary pieces include a very strong sense of movement and dimensionality. They show a lot of power and possibilities for the individual who wears these, because they allow that individual a high degree of self-expression. Contemporary pieces do not easily lend themselves to standardization or to be reduced to objects designed by computers or made by machines. So all jewelry has meaning, and both for the designer as well as the wearer. And we ask ourselves, where does this meaning come from? And too often this meaning derives from traditions and societal norms, and too often obscures the artist's hand or prevents the full force of individuality and personal expression. And when I use the term traditional, I'm using it very broadly. The term traditional covers jewelry where to judge the pieces as good or bad, or to determine whether I want to buy it or I don't want to buy it, people make these choices based on using rules which are derived from the larger society or culture or a particular reference group or at some point in time. We do not want meanings preloaded into our jewelry designs. We want to discover them as we begin to implement the design process itself, and as we begin to wear the jewelry and present it publicly. So with contemporary jewelry, we want this meaning to emerge from a back and forth dialogue between designer and client, teacher and student, designer and collector, and the dialogue clarifies how the designer should translate traditional inspiration into aspiration into the final contemporized design. The dialogue helps us recognize a sharing of understandings, assumptions, values, and desires. The dialogue helps us identify evidence in order to explain why any piece of jewelry feels finished and successful. And one of the professional responsibilities of the jewelry designer is to somehow manage and control this emergent dialogue. So we have to ask ourselves, to what extent does the designer have control over all of this? And the answer is the designer has to have a lot of control. Now, like everything else, opinions differ on how much control that designer should have over the process of contemporizing traditional jewelry. And opinions differ about how traditional and contemporary vernaculars should interrelate. They differ on the degree the designer should replace traditional or social norms with those of his or her own. And they have different opinions about the degree of risk the designer should undertake when contemporizing traditional jewelry, as the likelihood of negative consequences increases as the risk increases. So what we're going to do for the rest of the session, we're going to explore different concepts about finding contemporary inspiration from traditional jewelry. We're going to learn about 5 different schools of thought, about how all of this should play out. We're going to discover some insights learned from a workshop project that I developed about contemporizing Etruscan jewelry. And just pause, and there was a downloadable handout, and if you haven't downloaded it, there's this link on the screen here. So I want to take the next 20 or 30 seconds and mull around in your mind the first thoughts that come to you as you think about this question. What are the first things that come to mind when comparing contemporary to traditional jewelry? And I'm going to have you open people's mics and hear what they have to say.
Everybody can open your own. Just please be sure to shut down so we don't hear background noise. Thank you.
So when you're comparing contemporary to traditional jewelry, what are the first things that come to mind?
After reading your handout, I noticed one thing that popped up to me was the movement, free movement in the pieces that you see in contemporary adverse to the more staid where they, like a strand of knotted pearls.
Movement and dimensionality key. I try to build that into all my pieces in one way or another. The movement could just be the rhythm of the colors or the lines, or it could be actual objects moving as part of your piece. What else comes to mind comparing contemporary to traditional?
Well, looking at your sheet here, Warren, the one thing that's really jumped out to me that I'm having trouble with, which is violates expectations, challenges basic parameters. I see the good in that, but I also,
I can put it really simple. Think of a piece of peyote, very flat.
yeah.
It's all in one plane, very linear. But what if I made the edges curvy instead of straight? What if I added embellishment on top? So I'm adding
Yeah.
some movement, I'm violating line and plane because what if I take uh, 2 perpendicular lines like a cross, and instead of being perfectly perpendicular, I skew one. So I'm what it's called interpenetrating 2 planes. It becomes a more interesting thing. It captures your attention more. It holds your attention more. So just
Yeah.
it can take little things to violate, or with color, you can use simultaneity effects to combine colors that don't go together, uh, but it gives the illusion that they do go together. So
In other words, it's still pleasing, but it's
it's
just
still
not
pleasing.
not customary.
Brain. Yeah. So uh, I find simultaneity effects in particular to be a very strong use of color uh, to achieve a lot of interest. So jewelry moves, so the perceptions of color and pattern and texture keep changing to the viewer. And it could go from pretty in a still position to ugly through movement. Now, if you can, as a jewelry designer, anticipate all that movement and control the progression of color perception so it's always pretty, that's strong. There's where you have control over violating some of those norms of art theory. Lots of tricks,
Yeah.
but it's less interesting if you don't. Beads cast a color shadow. If I have a um, chartreuse bead next to a cobalt bead, and they both cast a shadow, but straight on, they might look pretty together. As someone turns to the left and the cobalt casts a shadow on the chartreuse, it gets muddy. And if I shift the other way, the one color stands out, but the other color gets muddy. But if I put a sterling silver bead between them, the bead acts like creates a simultaneity effect. So it actually enhances the color of the bead that's forward without losing the color of the bead, the complementary color next to it. There's a simultaneity effect. So that anticipates movement and all that, the great stuff.
Yeah. I love the idea of movement.
Um, yeah, I think that's one of the key things. Other comments? Okay, then I'm going to continue. So we ask ourselves what it means to contemporize traditional jewelry and sort of commenting, making little comments about that just now. It's basically how you take traditional forms and techniques, add your personal style, as well as make them more relevant to today's sense of fashion and style and individuality and personal expression. So traditional with contemporary pieces, you want to come up with, to be able to look at a contemporary piece and understand the choices the designer made to make it feel more contemporary. You want to understand those choices as being reasonable and that the piece makes sense and it feels appropriate and wearable and satisfies desires and feels alive. And this is really difficult to do. So with contemporary jewelry, we want traditions to be and remain inspirations, not crutches, suggestions and not limits, never hiding the individuality and expressiveness of the designer, nor preventing the wearer from being expressive of their own self and desires. Many people, jewelry designers among them, draw a lot of inspirations from traditional jewelry styles, and these styles could be ancient, like those of Egypt, Peru, Persia, India, China. They might be more recent, like Art Deco, Art Nouveau, mid-century modern. They might be primitive. You can picture tribal cultures in the rainforests of Brazil, or the savannas of Africa, or the Native American traditions in North, Central, and South America. They might be a particular reference group, a wedding party, a civic organization, a club, a military, or religion. Traditions provide proven strategies about what will be seen as reasonable and rational. That is, what will make sense and feel desirable. And jewelry designed with strong imitation or references to traditions are seen as safer and less risky to make or wear. When people yearn to feel connected to something, jewelry is one type of thing that helps people feel these connections. So with traditions and social norms, jewelry so inspired reaffirm for the individual a sense of connectedness to society or connectedness to culture or a particular reference group. Traditions and social norms justify everyday life choices. They provide a sense of certainty that the legitimacy of your choices will be shared. Now, traditions and social norms are very big clues for you to know that you've made the right choice. And if you wear a necklace that you think is beautiful, but your friends tell you it's ugly, this is scary, it's risky. People do not want to wear or buy jewelry unless they can anticipate how their friends and workmates will evaluate these choices. So it's no wonder that many jewelry designers resort to traditional forms and themes of expression, traditional techniques, traditional materials, traditional uses of color, texture, pattern, point, line, and plane. It feels like a shortcut to success, and it's much less risky. So we ask ourselves, to what degree should the designer reference the traditional design elements, the safer things, which were inspiring in the contemporary piece? Do we reference just the colors, the materials, the stitching, the stringing, the metalwork, other techniques, the structural components? So the contemporary jewelry designer has to figure out two things right up front. The first one, how he or she should interpret and break down the traditional piece into its elemental design units in order to better understand it. And then how he or she should use this understanding to figure out how and which elemental design units should be manipulated or kept or changed or ignored as the artist designs and constructs their contemporary piece. So I was once asked by a well-known country music star to design a necklace that was all black and full of all black crosses. And I put together a mock-up. She came into the studio, followed by her entourage. She always has an entourage. She didn't like it. And like a Greek chorus, after the singer herself had said no, her entourage repeated everything she said. She didn't like it, they didn't like it. And having her Greek chorus with her admittedly was kind of weird and unnerving. And I tried to elicit what was bothering her and what's something different she might like better. Now, this lady could sing, but she definitely couldn't talk, and they left. I created a second mock-up. They came back, same thing, a no. And then the chorus said, you guessed it, a no. I asked questions, I couldn't get a response. I said, give me one more try. I decided I would talk to each member of her entourage individually without the country singer present to analyze the situation from our topic today, contemporizing traditional jewelry. My first two attempts were very traditional. In the back of my mind were assumptions about how traditional Christians interacting with jewelry made of crosses would decide that they like it. But I discovered through these conversations that this wasn't what the singer wanted. She was religious, but she practiced a version of her faith that was very contemporary and very personal. And she wanted to wear that necklace at all her concerts, and with it to signify her personal view of her faith and how she practiced Christianity. So my third try, I varied the shapes, I varied placements and sizes of each cross. I designed each cross, into each cross, some kind of variant, some off-centeredness, some interpenetration of lines and planes, some very different positioning of the two perpendicular lines laying within a singular plane. I try to violate as much of these art theory rules as possible, and she loved it. So as I began to discuss earlier in the hour, contemporizing traditional jewelry makes sense because this mirrors how most people live their lives today. The contemporary jewelry designer, as I had to with the Black Crosses necklace, who wants to incorporate traditional elements or styles in some way, must come to grips with four things. It must have a really good understanding of how traditional jewelry differs from contemporary jewelry. It must understand why so many people draw inspirations and feel so connected to traditional styles. They have to come to grips with how literal the designer should be when contemporizing a traditional piece, and how the designer can substitute personal norms, personal values, personal desires to take the place of traditional ones. So as with almost everything these days, there's more than one brand. In fact, there are 5 different schools of thought about how contemporizing traditional jewelry should all play out. These are archaeological, historicism, revival. In the literature, it's sometimes called classical, deconstructive, and what I call contemporized. And each of these different schools of thought differ in terms of what they're about. They differ on how you should differentiate between traditional and non-traditional in your designs. And they differ in terms of the risk to the designer for successfully creating something which feels finished and successful. So the first school of thought is archaeological. When I started college many years ago, I thought I wanted to be an archaeologist. I took 2 courses and realized this wasn't for me, but I still appreciate the approach. So in one class, we looked at an archaeological site in Iran, and there wasn't much to the site. There was part of a dirt mound, an area that seemed to be a place where food was cooking, and the remnant of a wall where some building had been. And based on all of this extensive evidence, we talked about how we would reconstruct the small settlement to the way it might have looked. And this is the archaeological approach. So the archaeological approach tries to replicate, duplicate, preserve. It could be a style, a technique, a particular artifact, an artisan's work. They want to rescue the past before it fades away so we can experience this piece or technique today. In dealing with traditional versus non-traditional, it's all about the traditional. Nothing new is introduced. There's a purity of belief in traditional craftsmanship, norms, and values. And the goal is to bring to life how things were thought about and constructed back then for a new contemporary audience. And there's really no design risk. Now, the second school of thought is called historicism. So I had this guy as a client who liked to wear custom-made jewelry, and he was unwilling to take risks. He was unwilling to wear anything out of the ordinary. He used to bring in magazine images showing what corporate executives and military types were wearing, and to him, by the jewelry being in the magazine, he could anticipate that his friends would look at his jewelry favorably. And I duplicated these looks for him, and this is historicism. We want to draw a logical linkage from something about tradition or something that happened in the past, something about a social norm, to exactly whatever piece of jewelry we're making today. So in historicism, they selectively imitate works of historic artisans. It's very literal with keen attention to historical detail. If new elements are added, these do not compete or overshadow the historical vernacular. In dealing with traditional versus non-traditional, it's primarily about traditional and what should be imitated or copied today. And again, they want to establish a logical linkage between some kind of tradition or norm and what we're having today. And there's very little design risk. The third school of thought is called revival. So sometimes I get so frustrated with my students, they seem afraid of sex. They feel awkward even discussing how to rework their pieces to make them more sensuous. They rather hide behind imitating jewelry or imitating fashion styles where there's some universal acceptance of something just short of lust, something just short of passion, but has some emotional or sentimental feelings attached to it. And this is the revival school of thought. So in the revival school of thought, they want to modify or reinterpret, perhaps introducing new elements into traditional designs, but mostly literal. So it begins with an existential or sentimental romanticism. They want to evoke feelings about lifestyles, feelings about beliefs, feelings about imagery, symbols, cultures, feelings strongly associated with a particular group or culture or point in time. And revival jewelry is often described as a rebirth. And sometimes it's also a reaction against modern technology, materials, and ways. So you see a lot of use of handcraft, and a lot of pieces are designed with an easing of restrictions on female sensuality. In dealing with tradition versus non-traditional, they want to establish a link between felt differences between some traditional history or normative element and a feeling today. They want to bring assumptions about what felt purer, simpler, more sensuous then into the present now. And revivalism and historicism are very similar. Historicism, they want to establish this logical linkage, and revivalism, they want to establish emotional felt linkage. And there's some design risk in revivalism, but there are no roadblocks to design. And the fourth school of thought is deconstructive. So I like to go to thrift stores and garage sales and flea markets and find vintage jewelry. And these pieces don't even have to be fully intact because I know I'm going to just break them apart into a set of components and use these components in one of my very non-vintage style compositions. And this is deconstructive. Deconstructive, they form new contemporary pieces and arrangements using traditional materials and components. In comparing traditional versus non-traditional, a deconstructive designer wants to create a completely different aesthetic. The only connection to tradition is the use of old parts and pieces. So the deconstructive idea is that this is going to force the person to have to redefine what about the contemporary piece is meaningful and evocative for themselves. So the deconstructive designer wants the wearer to disengage from traditions and then newly re-engage with new, more contemporary ideas and values. There's a very high design risk. And the last school of thought is contemporized. So people always love traditionally inspired jewelry. Traditionally inspired jewelry designs will always continue to be produced. They'll always probably most likely dominate the market. However, I don't think there's much of a future for the traditional jewelry designer. It's too easy to be replaced by computers and machines. And these traditional designs, they're not alive enough for today. There's too much conformity. And my students call me pushy, as I mentioned earlier. They say I'm pushing them to be professionals when all they want to be are crafters. So I get very devious in my classes. I lead them to design and create pieces that incorporate a lot of the contemporary ideas for using design elements, like on your handout, but I don't tell them that's what they're doing. And as they get more and more excited about their designs, I then have those aha, I told you so moments with each one. So the designer and contemporized piece is going to imbue the piece with traditional inspirations. Go back one. They want to conceive new ideas and forms, but also at the same time create a piece which has the sense and sensibility that it belongs in contemporary times. The success of these pieces are evaluated based on how tradition is leveraged to conceive new ideas and new forms. So the past is an inspiration, but it's not a directive. It's not a straitjacket. And in dealing with traditional, non-traditional, Contemporize emphasizes the non-traditional with some references to tradition, but they're not concerned with either linking contemporary and traditional or even trying to differentiate between them. There's considerable design risk with the contemporized approach. Here, the designer is asked to substitute his or her personal ideas and personal values to replace those typically extending from various traditions and social norms. Difficult to do and can be really scary for the designer. While you're designing, it takes a long time to make a piece, to think about it, make a piece. It gets scary if you think someone's going to reject it. So the success of any piece is judged by individuals as it relates to them personally and not by any perceived connection, intellectual or emotional, to historical or traditional norms and values. So I organized a week-long workshop in Cortona, Italy several years ago, which focused on contemporizing Etruscan jewelry. And during the week, we played with a few different examples of Etruscan jewelry and how to contemporize each one. So what you see in this image on the left is an original ancient Etruscan collar from about 500 BC. In the middle is my first attempt at contemporizing. I call this the vestment. And on the right is my second attempt at contemporizing. I call this the contemporary Etruscan collar. So at the beginning of the project, we began by examining several pieces of Etruscan jewelry. You can see some of them on the screen here. We broke down these Etruscan jewelry pieces into their essential traditional design elements. We thought about things like color, material, pattern, texture, silhouette. We thought about point, line, plane, shape. We thought about wearability. We thought about the emotions a piece evokes. We wondered why someone would wear the piece in the first place. when they would wear it, and why they would like it. We did acknowledge that often traditional choices are limited by what materials are available, as well as the availability of existing technologies for manipulating them. But when contemporizing a piece, we set no limitations. Now, thinking what it meant to contemporize these pieces, how could we manipulate the design elements to end up with something that was contemporary, that paid some kind of reference or homage to the traditional piece, and also was a satisfying work of art? So in the workshop, we talked about rearranging design elements, excluding some, adding others. We looked at the pros and cons of various techniques. We talked about the sense and sensibilities we wanted to convey, how the piece might be worn today, and what someone would want out of a contemporized piece today. So my first attempt was this vestment, and the primary technique here is a bead weaving stitch called the end to belly stitch. I chose the end to belly stitch for this project because I wanted to end up with a piece that felt very fluid, that had an interesting pattern and texture, that had an unusual juxtaposition of positive and negative spaces. I wanted something in which I could build in a lot of movement and some dimensionality so that there would be an ever-shifting perception of color, light, and shadow. So this piece is a more literal interpretation of the original piece. The design approach seems very influenced by revivalism. And there are however, a lot of contemporary design features. So the end to belly stitch, it's a herringbone pattern, lots of negative spaces, what I'd call windows. We use new materials. Rather than two strips of beadwork, one laying exactly on top of the other, I have the top layer overlapping the inner side to create a curve on the inner part of the silhouette instead of a straight line or an edge. The outer layers are not attached together, so the outer edges of both layers move with the person as the person moves, and they move somewhat independently. Moreover, the two overlapping layers are staggered rather than aligned, giving the piece more depth. So rather than in the original piece linearly stacking metal pieces one on top of the other within a single plane, with the end to belly stitch, these layers flare out like your hand. So the inside, your wrist, and the outer edge flares out. As the layers keep shifting as the person moves, the perceptions of color, pattern, and texture change. So these two layers will undulate like waves. They will just shift, self-adjust back and forth. They will jump up and down based on different kinds of movement. The colors are coordinated but not matched. And the movement from one end to the other is much more fluid, less rigid, fewer discernible boundaries, and more feminine. And I selected these contemporary design elements because I want someone viewing my piece as worn to be excited, and I want to retain that person's attention and excitement because they're never sure which part of the piece to experience first. Each section competes to capture their attention as the person is moving around. So in this piece, there has to be a lot of movement. There has to be surprises in how colors, textures, and patterns and lines and planes present themselves as the piece moves. There has to be some sense of dimensionality. The piece needs to feel sensuous. We want the people viewing it to be very motivated to touch it, to hold it, to play with it, to want it. My second attempt was this contemporary Etruscan collar. It more fully fits in solely with the contemporized approach. The contemporary design features are very similar to that of the vestment, but the overall look is definitely freed from that of the traditional inspirational piece. So I want to leave you today again with those three guiding questions I began at the beginning. And I just want you to think about each question. And you can comment, open your mic and comment freely if you want. So the first guiding question was, how is contemporary jewelry different from traditional jewelry? And I keep repeating this question because you have to have a very clear idea in your head about how you personally might accept the challenge of contemporizing traditional jewelry. So how would you personally accept the challenge of contemporizing personal jewelry? And again, I'm going to just pause here and you can just reflect on this for about 15 seconds, or you can open your mic and make a comment or ask a question. So I leave it for you. How would you approach contemporizing traditional jewelry? How would you personally picture your work, what you do? How would you make it more contemporary? Okay, and I have 3, 2, 1. I'm going to go on to the next question. To what degree should the contemporized piece reference the traditional piece which inspired it? So I ask this question because with a traditional piece, you already can anticipate how someone might evaluate the piece as finished and successful. But with contemporary pieces, there's little or no reference to traditions, so there could be a lot of uncertainty here on justifying whether you thought the piece was good or bad. So again, just take about 15 seconds to think about this. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, you can free up your mic. So to what degree should the contemporized piece reference the traditional piece which inspired it? So the vestment referenced the piece a lot. The Etruscan collar did not. Based on how people are attracted to both pieces, I would say the Etruscan collar, the more contemporized piece, gets a lot more attention. It's gotten a lot more attention over the years. Okay, now I'm going to bring it.
Which one got more attention, Warren?
The
The,
contemporized, the Etruscan collar, the very contemporized piece.
the
So
second one.
the
Yeah.
second one.
Because it looks more traditional than the first one, which I thought was more unique
The first
in
one
design.
references a lot of the tradition. Um, I personally like the first one, the vestment, better because it feels very sensuous. It looks really good on someone. Sexy, it's very
Yeah.
sexy.
And the
Uh,
Etruscan collars were not sensual. They were
it's not
stiff.
sensual, but when someone wears it, actually it is. Uh,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who are more attracted to that just picture wearing it and they see
Mhm.
more opportunity maybe to wear it. They're definitely more attracted to that one.
Yeah.
And it feels very soft also, because the underbelly stitch is very, very fluid. That attracts them to play with it. Other comments, questions?
Hi,
Although,
hi, Warren. This is Sana.
what's that?
Hi. I had a response, reaction. I was thinking that maybe to what degree may differ depending on the creator's desire, or want. Maybe you might want to explore the outer edges of far away from the reference point, as how far can you take it away from the reference and how close do you want to be? So I don't know. I think the answer to your question, it might depend on my personal objectives.
And that's the whole definition of contemporary design. It's your values
Yeah.
and how you make them come through.
And maybe it might be an exploration because maybe you don't find out the answer until you try it.
So
I
you
don't
finish.
know.
Yeah.
We
We
don't
did have
know
one of
until
the,
we do it. I don't know until we try, make an attempt. I don't know. Just thinking out loud. Everything.
yeah, on another Etruscan piece, we did a very avant-garde version of it, really bizarre. So you can take it pretty far and see. But I think a lot of people don't like the avant-garde look, or there's a more limited audience for something that is very, very ultra contemporary. Uh, but it's
Yeah, I
your
can't put
choice as
myself
a
back on
designer.
camera, but but I think that that's part of the fun. I don't know. I kind of have a guilty pleasure watching Project Runway, and
Uh-huh.
I actually think that the avant-garde one or the unusual, what I forget what they call it, unusual material or
Yeah, that's
untraditional
fine.
material one
Yeah.
is actually the more potentially exciting one. How's that? It has the highest potential for something. What could we, what might they do?
And you're just going into that contemporary area, different materials, unexpected arrangements, violating all those traditional assumptions about what it should be. Yeah, and it's gets you excited. It's interesting. Yeah. Other comments? Okay, well, the third guiding question was, if the wearer does not feel a connection between the contemporized jewelry and all those social normative things which signal whether something is good or bad, can the contemporized piece of jewelry still be judged as successful? So another way I can ask this, in the absence of universally accepted rules, what evidence would you personally use to judge a contemporized piece as successful? So it's up to you, the designer, and the person who wants to wear or buy it to decide if it's good or bad. What are they going to look at to just make that decision if they have no um,
Guideline.
guardrails?
I think a lot would depend with the artist. If he's happy with what he or she is happy with what he's made, then in his eyes, it's successful.
So contemporary design, it's not just the artist; it's the person wearing it. You can't judge it as successful unless you see it worn, because jewelry is supposed to be worn, and jewelry is supposed to
What,
help the wearer find their personal sense of self.
so
So
is that the artist that wears it, or is it a buyer that wears
the
it? Does
artist, it
that,
could be something just between the designer and himself.
yeah.
Uh,
It seems to me you need both. As an artisan that is an artist and wants to sell, you need the artist to be very happy with it and the buyer to love it.
right, and that's where I talked about having a dialogue. You have to manage that dialogue and have control over it as a designer, but it's going to be a dialogue. It's not all up to you. And not, may want to exhibit it. You may want someone to collect it. You may want to treasure it yourself, but uh, it, it's a dialogue. It's back and forth. It's a complex interaction over meaning and how it gets expressed and whether it's relevant to you, whether it shows something that you desire. Now, I
And if
find
you're
it
trying to,
challenging and
if you
fun.
want to, if you want to sell it, then your conversation with the buyer needs to help the potential buyer understand sort of the story behind the piece, as
Right.
well as just liking it on its surface, but to have a story that goes with it that they carry with them and tell their admirers about.
Yeah, yeah. Now, sometimes the jewelry itself can tell the story because you see the choices the designer made, and you can compare it to the choices the designer did not make, and that reveals a lot of values. So you can the silhouette, where it lays. In India, the silhouette determines where it's safe to look and where it's safe not to look. Uh, so that tells you a lot about social relations between genders. It just tells you a lot just looking at the silhouette and the position of the silhouette. So there are lots of signals in the jewelry. And a lot of people like to wear jewelry instead of talking about things. They want the jewelry to speak. So the jewelry's got to really speak for them. And that's the designer has to be very in touch with that. Like with the Black Crosses necklace, I mean, it had to speak to the singer to make it work, or she just wouldn't have paid for all my work. So, and when the singer couldn't articulate what she wanted, um, that was pretty frustrating. I'm glad her entourage, without her there, could talk more to what the singer wanted.
And the buyer's going to want to talk about it and have sort of some bragging rights, so to speak, what it is, where it came from, the history of it, especially a piece that is really has a lot of meaning behind it. It's really important for the buyer to understand that.
Right.
And that's where selling in person is a lot more effective than trying to sell online.
Yeah, it's much easier to sell in person and show your personality as a designer and all that. Yeah.
Mhm.
But most people are going to not be there in person. They may be there the first time, but not necessarily the follow-up time.
Mhm.
So, um, and it's hard to train. If you're in a store, it's hard to train the staff in the store to represent your pieces because they don't necessarily understand them. They might not even care to do all the work to understand them. So, yeah, it's hard. Other comments?
This has been fascinating.
Okay, just a few more slides and we'll be done. We could have more conversation. I just wanted to point out two books if you're interested in reading about all this in more detail. And the first book is my book that's So You Want to Be a Jewelry Designer. And the second book is by Valerie Hector called The Art of Beadwork. And in both books, they go into a lot of detail about contemporary design, about traditional design, about the nexus between contemporary and traditional design. In my book, I'm always pushing my students to become literate in jewelry design. And this whole book is about that. My students have to be able to decode design elements, to comprehend the implications for choosing one over another or combining two or more with each other. And they need to be fluent, which means having automaticity in all of this. And only in this way, I believe, can my students survive and thrive as jewelry designers, because I believe that bringing a more contemporary aesthetic to your designs is a key aspect to a professional life. I want to leave you also with a little exercise. This is an ancient Roman bracelet. It's wire woven with embedded stones. I'm just going to leave it on the screen for a few seconds. I want you to think about the kinds of things you might do to contemporize this, or you might just think out loud with your mics there. Uh, what things would you want to keep? What things would you want to imitate? What would you want to change? What might it look like if you were contemporizing this piece?
You could wire wrap the pieces so they dangle off the center.
Yeah, that would give you a movement, more dimensionality, just right there. Yeah.
I would keep the colors. The colors are amazing.
So
That would,
is this a round piece? It's
was that?
round, right? It's
Yeah.
round, right? So, yeah.
Yes. It's like a rope, a wire woven rope, and like a push-pull clasp in the middle with a stone
Mhm.
on top.
Yeah.
So one of the pieces I did, I created a frame and I put stones in square stones all along the side, and they overlapped each other and they moved freely. And that's how I approached that piece.
Do you have a picture of your creation?
Not on the screen here. So anyway, thank you. You can always reach me at warren@warrenfeldjewelry.com, and I'm just going to open it up to if anyone has comments, questions.
How did you start odds and ends?
I was a healthcare professional. I got really burnt out, and I have been director of the Tennessee Primary Care Association. I wrote a reorganization plan and wrote myself out of the organization and opened up a little retail business to sell jewelry. And I had no interest in making jewelry. And after a few years, I started making some pieces to sell, just really to make money. And everything I made broke.
Oh no.
I was trying to figure out how I could make pieces that didn't break. And then I started getting really interested in the whole idea of design and just really kept exploring and experimenting. So that was Land of Odds.
I
I
found
discovered that place years ago. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to share. I was a therapist for 50 years, and I was a homeless youth that made my living making as a street artist jewelry. And I brought it into my practice. What you talked about today about connection, I realized was part of what was going on unconsciously with me. But I would design pieces to wear when I saw clients because I saw very heavily traumatized people in very serious situations. And some people were more verbal than others, able to communicate. And so I worked very carefully to wear jewelry that had something in it for them to connect to when they were having such a terrible time. And I didn't realize that a lot of your ideas are in there that I was doing unconsciously, but it helped people to calm down. And I often gave them some piece of jewelry as a transitional object
That's
when
great.
they left treatment and stuff to hold on to. And I always got a lot of positive feedback about different aspects of that. But I really appreciate you bringing it up to the surface, so to speak.
Yeah, jewelry is just so important to people on so many levels.
I also feel it's one of the few ways as a woman you can make your signature known or your point of view known or your values known. Has a lot to it that way.
Yeah, and traditional jewelry really represses a lot of that.
Yes,
Or
it does.
contemporary politics really represses a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you. I really appreciate your whole take on it and you're looking at it.
Warren, on this slide here, it says good design answers the question, why does some jewelry get your attention and others not? Are you defining good design, or is good design something that we can go look at as a book or something?
Uh, in my book, I define it pretty,
In the book you just mentioned.
yeah.
Okay.
If I were teaching a year-long college course on jewelry design, that would be my textbook.
Okay. And you mentioned two books, didn't you? I think I paid
Valerie
attention to
Hector's book.
one. Pardon?
Valerie Hector's book, The Art of Beadwork. It's a great book if you haven't read it.
I haven't.
And Warren's book is available on Kindle as a as a I just priced it, Warren. It's a lot more affordable as a Kindle.
Kindle,
I
ebook,
just put it in
paper.
my cart.
Uh,
Yeah.
If you buy
But
a
there-
Kindle, you need to download it. You will no longer be able to download your Kindle books in about a week and a half.
Oh
You won't be
my,
able to
that's good.
own them. You have access to them, but only through them. You will no longer be able to put it on other devices, save it.
Warren, could you go back to the slide before this then? Just for a second.
This one?
Oh, no, the one, I thought there was another slide that showed your, here we go. So was it one of these two books that you're referring to in the next slide?
So You Want to Be a Jewelry Designer is the book I wrote.
Yeah,
That's what I'd use as a textbook.
okay, that's the one. All right, just wanted to make sure.
Valerie Hector goes all around the world and describes beadwork all around the world in great detail and on a more theoretical level.
Mhm.
We had in my store, we had an advanced bead group that met every week, and we took each culture and made pieces from each culture and then tried to make them feel more contemporary. That was just a really interesting learning experience
Wow.
for me.
Do you
Some
focus
things don't take
mainly
long.
on seed beads?
Seed beads,
Seed bead work?
uh, Diane Fitzgerald's Zulu beadwork.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen her books. They're great. So we would take the designs, which look very like Zulu beadwork. They look very traditional, and some of them didn't take very much to make them look like contemporary modern pieces. There's a square tube. One of the gals in the group, she twisted it, and it changed the look completely. It seemed very contemporary just by twisting it. It was like just so interesting.
Was the piece you made for the country music star done with seed beads?
Oh, no, that was
Okay.
chain and
Crosses.
Yeah,
crosses. And,
that's right.
some crosses I found, but most of them I had to make. But
Okay.
silversmithing, metalwork, clay, things like that.
I have a question on how does one start? Do you recommend playing it safe and doing smaller little endeavors, or going for broke? You know, something, some project
I would
bigger.
pick a project that feels challenging to you.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be going for broke, but it doesn't have to be safe. But just challenging for you. And while you're doing it, think how you might be able to do it better, or in this case, more contemporary.
Maybe make, like you did, a couple of
Versions.
iterations. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the whole
Yeah.
workshop was a learning process for me. I mean, I knew my goals. I didn't know if I could teach them really, but we really had a lot of fun and did, just experimenting, talking and experimenting. You never know where something's going to take you.
Like the old adage, let the beads talk to you.
Let the beats talk, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love right angle weave because you can build so much off of it. And then I like mixing techniques because you can use the strengths of one and or both techniques. Let's say if you're using two techniques and make them work even better.
Well, that's what Carol Wilcox Wells did in her book, is
Mhm.
how to combine techniques.
I love if you they don't really teach techniques very well in bead weaving or really most of the other disciplines, but every technique has part of the steps to maintain a shape and another part of the steps to give it a fluidity, help it drape and flow. And so you've got to, within the technique, you've got to be able to vary your thread tension between a little tighter and a little looser. So like right angle weave, the right angle weave unit has to be very tight. It has to, all the beads in the unit have to move as one, but the connecting bead, the two right angle units connected, have to be able to self-adjust in response to different stresses and strains. So the connection has to be a little looser between units. So if you know that, you end up with a piece that just feels more comfortable, is able to keep its shape better. And the same story goes for all the different techniques. The Petersburg chain, a lot of people hate that because they don't know how to do it. You have 4 beads in the center of the Petersburg chain unit that have to be very tight and function as one. They're there to hold the shape, but the rest of the part of the Petersburg chain unit and how they're connected have to be loose so that the piece feels fluid.
Petersburg chain.
St. Petersburg.
Petersburg, yeah. St. Petersburg, Russian chain. And even like the peyote, the first 3 rows, the zipper has to be very tight. And if it's tight, then the whole rest of the bracelet will be, or necklace, whatever you're doing, will be fine. But if you don't get those 3 rows tight enough, then the rest of the piece starts to pull apart or get uneven.
That's the biggest complaint on new beaters.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's a Nancy Kane statement. Nancy, if you've ever done a master class with her, she talks a lot about tension and that you set it up with those first rows. So
It's so interesting that defines the whole piece, how you do the zipper.
it really does. It really is. It's fascinating to.
Are there any last questions or comments?
Warren, thank you so much. Your talk was fabulous.
Thank you.
Ye-
I like to talk, you probably could tell.
Yeah, it was great.
It took me
Very
a long-
inspiring.
It took me a long time to get you to finally say yes.
Well, again, if you have any questions anytime, just email me.
Thank
That
you,
sounds
Warren.
wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, yes.
Are we ready to say goodnight?
For those of us
Night,
on the East
thank you.
Coast, yeah, it's about that time.
I'm sure. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Warren.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See y'all
Thanks,
later.
Warren.
Thank you,
Thank
Warren.
you.
Bye.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye-bye.